West Asia instead of Middle East, because West Asia is more appropriate and relevant from the Indian perspective than the word Middle East, which has a different connotation, especially imperial and colonial connotation. Today's talk is on global power shifts and the region. What are the key takeaways from the Doha Forum? My talk would be in three segments. The first part, I will highlight briefly about what is the Doha Forum all about. Then about the global power shifts and what impact has it made on West Asia, briefly including on India also, which is which considers West Asia to be part of extended Indian neighborhood. So, without much ado, you see, Doha Forum is an annual meeting in the Qatari capital, and this has become extremely important for a number of people, from world leaders to political leaders, intellectuals, press people, NGOs, civil servants, academics, and a whole host of people, more than 5,000 people gather here annually. December, it has become a mecca for all of these above mentioned category of people who come and attend this forum, which has been so far held regularly in the Sheraton Hotel, which is the biggest and most symbolic icon of Qatar's building process. Very old, but still the largest, most visible hotel there. And they have a number of halls, apart from the inauguration, which is held in Dana. And then, 3 halls of Salwa, 1, 2, and 3, Al Rayyan, and Al Majlis. They have a number of big halls where parallel meetings are held after the inauguration. And, these are attended to the full, more than, the halls are full, practically full. People wish to identify depending upon their interest on which region, which topic, which area, economics, trade, commercial relations, foreign policy, security, defense, bilateral relations, international problems, role of multilaterals, so on and so forth, a variety of topics. I'm told that there's a very big bureaucracy or cell which works around the year in identifying the topics, in identifying the people, because every year new people are added to the list of invitees, only for the keynote, but for chairing the sessions and speakers, commentators. And there are a variety of programs in the media hall also, where several parallel units meetings are held, where press people from Al Jazeera and all the media houses around the world, they come and cover. It's mostly from the global south, but also from West Europe, America, Australia, Russia, and Japan, and other countries also. So you have an opportunity to meet well-informed people from all over the world, speaking different languages. And it is held both in Arabic as well as in English. There is simultaneous translation, mostly in these two languages, but some speak in other languages also, like French, which is also translated. So it's a mammoth effort from the security point of view, from logistical point of view, from accommodating VIPs, from arranging intellectuals and all the VIPs. It is a major event welcomed by Qatari nationals also, because they also participate in large numbers. Qatar University and all the major foreign universities who have their camps in Qatar, and also think tanks and intellectuals and political leaders, embassy people, and from the neighboring GCC countries, also large number of people come. So, in fact, I can say that practically every nation on the earth, every major multilateral organization from UN to OIC to African Union, from European Union, from whole host of international organizations, multilaterals, people are present here, and top prime ministers, foreign ministers, UN officials, etc. So you can imagine the intellectual output, the discussion output from this is enormous, and it immensely benefits people from all walks of life. Those who are from the academic side, they enjoy this presentation, first-hand information from people who have been in crisis zone hotspots, who have worked in difficult regions, whether it is Gaza or Lebanon or Democratic Republic of Congo or Panama, or in Ukraine or South Asia, so on and so forth. So you have this time, the main thing I found was most of the chairpersons were from Qatar itself, and I was surprised to see the level of intellectual contribution from Qataris, both Foreign Ministry, University of Qatar, and various other officials who are working in international organizations, multilateral organizations. They are all there to strengthen, help, and make this forum a success. So, in that way, young people, middle-aged people, elderly people from all over the world descend in Doha, in Qatar, for 7th and 8th. That was the 2 days conference. But I also participated in the third. Very few selected invitees were had privilege of attending the third day conference, which was on mediation and conflict resolution, peace, whatever. So the whole day was devoted in two parallel sessions on global hotspots, and made several interventions in this third day conference, and also in the first and second day, several of the sessions which I participated. Humanly, it is not possible to attend all of the several committees, several sessions, because simultaneously they are held from early morning 9 o'clock up to 6 o'clock and beyond. So it is intellectually and time-wise very challenging 2 day, very busy schedule for all of us. So we have to identify the programs which we would like to attend and participate and contribute. But the inaugural and the concluding session, that is important. Qatari ruling family members or the former, the mother of the present ruler also came for the concluding sessions, and she participated and gave a brilliant lecture on a variety of issues. So briefly, this is the format, and I would say that apart from Doha Forum, Qatar has become well known because of its mediation in global crisis hotspots from Gaza to Taliban's Afghanistan or Ukraine Lebanon or DRC or Somalia or Yemen or Sudan, so on and so forth. Its soft power is visible through these, along with the large number of uh, football games for the sports games which are held annually. The Arab Club Football Club was held simultaneously when the Doha Forum took place. So around the clock, around the year, Doha is full of conferences, seminars, meetings, the sport events of all type, not only football but also many other types of sports. So Qatar has placed itself on the global map, along with Qatar Airways, Al Jazeera, and its mediation role. And this Doha Forum is one more flagship of the ruling family there, which has put Qatar on the global map. Coming to the topic, you see the uh, global power shifts were visible soon after the end of the Cold War in 1990-91, when the Soviet Union was defeated in Afghanistan, and the unipolar world led by the United States emerged, and the United States and the Western world had unique opportunity to safeguard, strengthen, and sustain their position, which was unparalleled in history. But unfortunately, the leadership uh, got drunk with the power, the swiftness with which Soviet Union, their rival, collapsed, and they embarked on a series of wars from Iraq to the Afghanistan debacle, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, the involvement in Arab Spring, creating civil war conditions in Syria, in Yemen. And then finally, they thought that the 21st century, after the 9/11 events, we must go on war on terror and replace any rival which is attempting to challenge the Western domination hegemony. So you had the Ukraine crisis also in the making since 2004, or at least 14, when direct CIA and American and NATO involvement took place, and expansion of NATO also took shape since then. And there was pressure on the Soviet Russian speaking people in the eastern part of Ukraine, and they thought that, like Afghanistan, they can use Ukraine to weaken and disintegrate and finish Russia, which they considered as a major nuclear power, a major challenger to the Western hegemony. But unfortunately, the Russians gave a fitting reply. And that is how the stalemate continues, but mostly in favor of Russia, because it has gained upper hand at the military front in Ukraine. And also by seizing $300 billion of Russian foreign exchange and preventing sanctions, imposing sanctions on Russian oil and gas and other commodities. They thought that it will weaken Russia financially, politically, militarily, diplomatically, isolate and issue arrest warrant through the ICC against Putin. But all this has failed, and Russia has not only regained its military power and its inroads into Ukraine and safeguarded its financial autonomy, but also it has consolidated its relations with China and through BRICS and other countries, and emerged much more stronger to the surprise of not only NATO countries but also America and the other supporters of the United States. So in that way, the Western countries, through their own uh, wrong reading of the international system and the durability of Russian uh, capability and the emergence of China-Russia relationship along with Iran and North Korea has given a befitting challenge to the so-called rules-based order So the gradual shift in the power balance uh, geopolitically which was in favor of the United States and the West, gradually started shifting towards Russia, China, and the global South. But more importantly than this was the economic underpinning, because by early 1990s of the previous century, the American corporate sector gradually shifted the manufacturing base to China and other countries in East Asia, North and East Asia, because of the cheap labor and availability of raw materials and the profit margin which they hope to gain, thereby enabling China and the other countries like South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., Turkey also included, India also included. So the power engines, economic power engine, shifted to the eastern part or Asian part, and this has made China a major economic powerhouse, becoming the largest exporting nation of all commodities, basically enabled by the American short-sightedness that if we enable China to grow economically, we can integrate China into the Western economic system and through globalization and various other policies. But China had its own ambitions, its own goals, which is pursuing independently, and I don't think it will come under the influence of West because it wants to emerge and have an autonomous power base along with Russia, with BRICS and other countries. So in that way, the global power shifts were discussed in detail at the Doha Forum, and it was very clear from the many sessions which I attended that the American speakers mm, and the speakers from Russia, China, from India, from Turkey, from Iran, and other countries, they were not on the same wavelengths. The West European countries, the Americans, Canadians, the white people, so-called white people, they were still living in the illusion that they have an upper hand and that Russia, China's emergence is just a passing phase and that rules-based order is still intact and they hold sway over the UN, IMF, World Bank, the global financial systems to SWIFT, and that sanctions are a potent weapon to punish all the rivals who are challenging Western hegemony or American hegemony in particular. And that ultimately Russia will be punished and isolated, and then the focus would be on China. But the narrative from the other side was equally strong. They were presenting hard facts about what China has achieved, what Russia has achieved, what India has achieved, what Brazil and South Africa and other members of BRICS like Egypt, Iran, and the potential uh, uh, BRICS partners like Turkey or Indonesia or Malaysia or Nigeria and other countries, Saudi Arabia, etc. Because all put together, the BRICS countries and the prospective BRICS members who are likely to join next year, they constitute a major part of the world economy. So the G7 countries, their voices have become feeble, and that was visible in Doha. The strident position taken by the BRICS countries and the defensive position of the West. It was very obvious in many sessions and interventions made by learned participants in the sessions. It was very clear that this global power shift is there for everyone to see, not just in the military, financial, political, diplomatic sense, but also in the discussions, in the lectures, in the seminars, in the arguments which took place, because sometimes quite heated and sometimes very educative and very important data, hard facts which were presented, which were hard facts, and the West was unable to digest. That the other side has made tremendous progress, and they continue to make progress, whether it is China or India or Russia or other BRICS members or the global South as a whole. So the rules-based order and the Western hegemonic narrative, which was dominant quite some time back, is now slowly being demolished by scholars, intellectuals, leaders, men of letters from other global South countries or BRICS countries. So, what is happening? Uh, the West tries to preserve its the aura of its dominance, its control over the United Nations through veto of the United States and other powers, and also through the financial system, dollars and SWIFT system, and by sanctions, etc. They still imagine that they can control and dominate and prevail in their hegemonic ambitions, but the groundswell support for China, for other countries, it is most obvious, and this was visible in a variety of themes, topics. The list is long. I don't want to take much of your time. We can discuss in the Q&A in the last segment of this presentation. So, what was happening on the scene, on the diplomatic front, whether it was American Make America Great program, how far that has been successful, the American tariff war, imposition of tariffs, this was discussed. WTO, what other countries can do for this discriminatory tariff policy initiated by the United States, or the attacks on Venezuela, which was also discussed, or American support to Israel, which was discussed in detail, or the Ukraine war in several phases regarding the role of mediators like Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, so on and so forth. All these were discussed along with Russia's policy towards the African countries, how more and more African countries are getting rid of French and American troops and coming away from their defense security alliances, and who prefer interaction of military, economic, diplomatic with Russia and China and other BRICS countries. All these were discussed in detail. Although no conclusions at some of the sessions were arrived at, because it was just a forum. People just presented in each meeting, in each session, there were 4 or 5 speakers and one moderator. And this was for 45 minutes, and then one 15 minutes Q&A session. So there were 2 or 3 interventions were allowed if the moderator was democratic. Otherwise, some behaved like dictators, and they didn't give any chance for participants to raise their queries, questions, etc. When the topic was too hot, you see, basically we have to remember that Qatar is part of the Western Alliance. It has the largest base, American base called Al Udeid base, from which the United States conducts its security, defense, military policies to the entire region of West Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, Indian Ocean region. So Qatar is dependent for its security on the United States, and Qatar is virtually used by the United States in the mediation attempts in Gaza or other hotspots like Libya or Taliban or Ukraine, etc., etc. And its foreign and economic and defense policies are oriented towards the United States or the West, and its investments also are mostly in the West. But it sells its gas and oil, some oil, mostly LNG and gas to countries all over the world, including India and Japan and West European countries also. So in that way, Japan doesn't allow a very free criticism of. They select speakers whom they identify will not be very critical of Israel or the United States or the Western policies. So they see to it that their policy or relations with the West are not undermined through discussions by hot-headed people who also come and attend and make interventions. But the tone and tenor is very obvious that it is largely under control and not too critical of the Americans, Israelis, West European countries, but growing voice is given. Like, for example, the UN Human Rights Speaker, Albanese, the woman speaker, she dominated many sessions. She spoke well and she was welcomed. The Palestinian leaders also were invited. Mm, I met some Hamas leaders also who were also present, who didn't want to be identified openly because of the threat to their lives by Israelis who bombed Qatar to kill the peace negotiators, etc., etc. So overall, it was obvious that the uh, that the differences between the two were obvious. And this forum, Doha Forum, I would say that it plays a vital role in shaping the future agenda because from the Turkish foreign minister to the Syrian leaders who had come, or top Israeli leaders also who were invited, or American leaders, congressmen, journals, publishers, many former foreign ministers, all of them, they spoke about the Sudan conflict, about the conflict in Yemen, in Gaza, etc., etc. And many people who are closely involved with the making of policy and preparing the agenda, whether it is to bring peace in global hotspots or in other diplomatic channels, play an important role. For example, I made an intervention on the third day in the mediation forum. They were all speaking about all the hotspots. And I said, in South Asia also we have a situation where we had war between India and Pakistan, both nuclear power. And although Trump claimed that he brought about the ceasefire, but the Pakistanis continued to raise the Kashmir issue, and the issue of terrorism bedevils the relations between the two countries. And the Americans are now supporting Pakistan, and China has been supporting Pakistan for a long time. And this explosive situation can also go out of hand. And as President Trump says, if he had not prevented this war to end through his efforts for a ceasefire, millions would have died in a nuclear exchange. So such is the seriousness of this situation. And although India says we are opposed to the international mediation, but studies should be conducted. Track 2 diplomacy, track 3 diplomacy should also be initiated by Qatar, or policy paper should be initiated, which would be considered by both the governments, India and Pakistan, to see how best to accommodate each other's point of view and see if there is a way forward to bring peace, security, and stability in South Asia. Because I mentioned that in case if there is a serious war between India and Pakistan, and there are casualties, we have more than 10 million people working in these countries, and families who will be affected would rush back to India, both from India and Pakistan and other countries also. So there will be dislocation of life, ordinary life, which is dependent on immigrant labor in the GCC countries, and this can affect daily life and the normalcy in these countries. So the GCC countries also should prepare policy papers and recommendations how best they can shape policies which will help bring peace, not just confine themselves to Iran and the United States or Gaza or Lebanon or Houthis or Yemen or Sudan or Ukraine or DRC or Venezuela. The other hotspots also should be covered simply because one country is opposed to international mediation. It doesn't mean that think tanks should not work and have people have expertise who would suggest, and some of these policy recommendations may be useful for the governments to start a process, even if they don't implement wholeheartedly. But at least they will be aware that there are people conscious and serious who are interested in resolving this and bringing peace and security and stability in this region also. You see, as far as this region is concerned, West Asia, this is undergoing churning at the fastest rate in its history. What West Asia was a few years ago and what it is, it is beyond one's imagination. Whether it is the development process or the destruction process or the alignment and realignment and wars and interventions from all angles or the leaderships, etc., etc. Last year, Doha Forum, I was there when the Bashar al-Assad government was overthrown. We were, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, was addressing, and he was the first to announce that, Turkish help, this group has taken over Damascus, and Bashar al-Assad has left to Moscow. It was confirmed. So, like that, there were many other officials also who were present from China. Our external affairs minister Jaishankar was also present last year. He gave one of the keynote addresses, which was received well. So, the stature of these meetings indicate the level of interest people are showing in this region, because this has become the hub. West Asia has become the hub, not only from the geopolitical point of view or the important choke points like Suez Canal, Bab al Mandab, or Strait of Hormuz, or the Turkish Straits, etc. But also because of its oil, gas, strategic location, and also at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Because important trade routes, sea routes, link this region with the rest of the world. The North-South corridor through Chabahar, Iran to Russia, Central Asia. Now the India-Middle East Economic Corridor through India, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, etc. Then the the Belt and Road Initiative, which links all majority of the countries in this region from Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, and other countries who are now part of this Belt and Road Initiative. So the ports and cities which have developed they have assumed importance. Military air bases, naval bases, which major powers have, along with the United States, that also adds to the strategic importance of this region. So, any decision taken by Israel or Turkey or Iran has its ramification, which invites not only diplomatic, political, and other implications, but also it has geo-economic and geopolitical dimensions also because of its linkages with the foreign elements. Like Israel is totally, dependent on the United States and the West, or the increasing dependence of Iran on Russia and China, or the growing export of oil and gas to Japan or China, yuan, etc. So the global interest on this region is much more than what it was. And also the airlines in this region, whether it is Qatar Airways or Emirates or Gulf Air or Oman Air, Kuwait Airways or Saudi, they link this region much more strongly, effectively, and in a widespread manner than what it used to be earlier. So people, whether they are tourists or for business, trade, immigrants, etc., this region has become the hub for all type of commercial trade, diplomatic, and for employment, economic development, etc., etc. So the shift on this region is visible through the discussions, through the topics, and the kind of leadership from each country has come from all walks of life, not just the diplomats or academic people or political leaders, NGOs, military leaders, cultural czars, so on and so forth. But ruling elites, people who have been in power or in power or who would be in power, all these people descend and simply listen. A prince may come from Bahrain and sit next to you. You may not know him, but he goes back with fresh ideas, fresh input, fresh interpretation, fresh perspective, and he makes his own contribution. Journalists from Zimbabwe or South Africa, from radio, television, etc. They conclude from the talk experts give in this forum, and they shape the policy in their own country. So in that way, even from this region, large number of people had come from Turkey, from Iran, from Arab countries, so on and so forth. So all of this makes an impact when they go home in writing, in speaking, in preparing policy papers, etc., etc. And in that way, it is this Doha Forum has become an important segment of intellectual output of a magnitude which was possible only in the Western capitals. I've seen this kind of gatherings, the World Day Club meeting in Moscow or Sochi, or in Japan or China, earlier in the Western countries like London, Paris, Canada, America, etc., etc. See, those countries which are undergoing economic churning because of economic problems, they don't hold such large gatherings as Doha Forum or the UAE's annual show. They also invite people of similar background for similar conferences. So these two countries are in competition, UAE and Qatar, not so much the other four GCC countries. Iran has its own institutes, etc., etc. Turkey has its own institute, but there's no doubt that Qatar has become the hub for international ideas where they are generated in new proposals, new ideas, very interesting cultural meetings, figures also interact, and you get a wholesome perspective. People as diplomats, leaders, NGOs, civil service people, cultural people, military people, etc., etc. So you get to know a holistic idea of the international issues, how they have to be tackled, and how the global power shift is slowly shaping the narrative in forums like the Doha Forum. I think I'll stop here and take a couple of questions for another 15 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this very insightful talk on Forum and different themes discussed there. Now we can take up some questions, 2, 3 questions preferably. You can raise your hand or just put your question in the chat box.
Umair, Hamad, your voice is not very clear.
So you can, it's coming now, sir?
Slightly better, but if you move closer to the mic, I think that would help me to understand the question.
Yes, sir. I'm just saying that it's time for questions. You can take up your questions. You can just raise your hand and ask your question directly to sir, or you can put your questions in the chat box. It's for audience. It's open for you.
Sir, I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this insightful session, sir. Myself, Garima Sharma. I am master's holder in International Relations and Area Studies from SIS JNU. So, thank you, sir, for this insightful session. My question is, how has multipolarity changed diplomacy in Middle East? Means how this diplomacy of Middle East has changed after this shift, how it is changing the diplomacy.
Well, multipolarity is still in the making. It is still the dominant power, that is the United States, which is shaping global politics, whether it is at the UN or through its tariff policy or economic sanctions, and through despite the International Court of Justice or International Criminal Court issuing warrant against Netanyahu or Putin, they have not been able to execute others because of the double policy. So the United States still on paper, in practice, it is still the dominant power. But other powers like Russia, China, India, BRICS countries, they are slowly putting forward their point of view, and which is, of course, being challenged. What China is saying is not totally accepted by the West, or what Russia is trying to do through BRICS is not welcomed, or how India is facing the challenge of tariff and pressure from the United States, or Brazil, which was condemned as leading the anti-America bloc through BRICS, or how pressure is mounted on South Africa or the other global South countries. So it is not a reality still of multipolarity to talk about diplomacy. Of course, these countries are pursuing the diplomatic channels, because when they meet as BRICS countries, or when their membership in G20 is increased, or at the NAM non-aligned meeting, or African Union, or Latin American Association of Countries, they increasingly put forward their point of view, their joint statements, their communiques, which are taken much more seriously. Because at the Kazan summit in Russia, I remember Russia took the leadership for an alternative payment system, which is now being increasingly seeing the light of the day. Because now about 42 countries have accepted payment in their home currency. This is now bulk of the $200 billion trade between Russia and China is conducted without dollars, or between Iran and Russia, or Iran and China, or North Korea, or Venezuela, or India also, or Saudi Arabia is selling 20% of its oil in yuan, Chinese currency, or UAE. So the voice of the uh, emerging multipolar world countries through BRICS, it is increasing, but still they are being openly challenged by the Western countries. There is this stalemate, the economic situation, how it shapes in the United States and Europe, how the Ukraine war will take shape, whether the West will accept the defeat and the victory of Soviet Union, whether sanctions will be removed, whether the European Union seizure of $300 billion of foreign exchange of the Russians is released, or the tariff policy is eased, and whether Russia, China, and America will come to an understanding and see the world from their perspective in a cooperative manner, or the confrontation will escalate as we are seeing in Venezuela, or Taiwan, or Ukraine, or Gaza, or Iran, so on and so forth. So there are still many blocks gap between the Western-led, American-led Western group and the multipolar countries like Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, Turkey, Iran, so on and so forth. So the diplomacy still doesn't have teeth, the power, the backing, the military hardware from the multipolar countries, but it is still making its inroads, and the Russian victory so far on the Ukraine front is an indication, and the softening of American tariffs on China is also realization of the Chinese power, and the Indian resistance for tariffs and pressure from the United States is also an indication that how these countries who are aspirant for a multipolar world are willing to challenge the Western countries, Western narrative, and the so-called rules-based order. And the majority in the United Nations is very clear. It is in favor of the multipolar system. And like, for example, on the issue of two-state solution for Palestine, more than 150 countries support the issue of Palestine. Or on Venezuela, majority of the countries are opposed to the gunboat diplomacy of the United States. Or majority of the countries did not respect the Western sanctions on Russia, like India, for example. We continue to buy oil and have trade and weapons with Russia. Like that, majority of the countries don't now adhere to sanctions on Iran. They continue to buy oil, have trade with Iran also. So in that way, the multipolar world and their diplomatic efforts are increasing, but still have not reached where the Americans and the West will accept totally to live in a cooperative world and share the global diplomatic achievements. Yes.
Yes. Anyone else? Is there some question? Okay. So, sir, am I audible?
Yes.
I was curious to ask a question about Qatar. And you talked about this mediation forum also as a part of this Doha Forum. Like when I see Qatar, I find it very paradoxical or ambivalent, sort of. At one time, you already have mentioned that Qatar hosts the largest base of United States, Ladid there. But at the same time, what Qatar is doing through Al Jazeera, like it's debunking the Western narrative and discourse. It's doing something else. Like at at one point, we understand that Qatar is ultimately part of Western system, but in terms of narrative, building a discourse, it's doing or undoing the Western uh, narrative or discursive hegemony. So how do you understand Qatar? Like it seems very ambivalent, very paradoxical to me.
Well, for the outside world, it may appear double-faced, but there is no denying of the fact that Qatar is basically dependent on the West, and it doesn't challenge the Western narrative or political influence like what Iran does. Iran is at loggerheads with the West. It's not willing to accept their hegemony. They want to have their own independent policy. But Qatar finds a way out between being dependent on the West and also advocating its own agenda because it wants to emerge as a major influencer country through Al Jazeera, through mediation, through its soft power diplomacy, and depicting, if not 100% accurately, what is going on in West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, other hotspots. But it gives a clear picture, much clearer picture than what BBC or CNN or the Israeli media want it to cover. So, like for example, in Gaza, they have their own correspondents still. In West Bank also, they were banned for some time, but they are still there. And much to the annoyance of the Netanyahu government, which has banned Al Jazeera, they still continue to broadcast. And Al Jazeera gives an excellent view of the daily killings of the Palestinians and the settlers' violence against the Palestinians, and also the killings in Gaza and the brutal policy towards the Palestinians and what they are doing in other parts of the region, whether it is assassination of political leaders in Lebanon or Iran or in Qatar or in other places. So, in that way, Qatar is finding space, although dependent on the United States and the West, but it doesn't want to antagonize Israel also to a great extent. It provides money to the Hamas or the Palestinians in Gaza or West Bank, etc. It mediates on the Chechen conflict or Ukraine conflict or Taliban, etc. So it tries to project its own power, although one must say that they work in competition with Saudi Arabia, with UAE, etc., etc. But they have their own narrative, and it is this independent approach which saved them from the embargo or boycott by Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt. We remember some time back there was a complete blockade because of the accusation that Doha is supporting terrorism, an extremist group, and Ikhwan al-Muslimin. So a complete blockade was imposed on Qatar. But through its diplomacy, it was able to circumvent and overcome the boycott because it has established contacts, relations, and it also has excellent relations with its neighbors, Iran, Turkey, Oman, India, for example, China, Russia, the United States, etc., etc. So Trump and other Western leaders, they condemned this boycott initiated by Saudi Arabia, which strained relations with these countries which were isolating Qatar. So in that way, it tries to be on the right side, the West, But at the same time, whatever the BBC cannot cover or CNN or other countries cannot cover, they cover and become important and attractive, and that is how Qatar juxtaposes its policy between its subservient to the United States West and also safeguard its own family rule and its growing role as a soft power through its diplomatic efforts. And people welcome this kind of situation. Al Jazeera English has become, in fact, more popular than the BBC in this region. If you see the kind of programs they have, the kind of people who are invited for their programs, like the Bottom Line or various other programs Al Jazeera operates on a daily basis. Top intellectuals, top experts, top leaders come there, and very dispassionate discussion take place, sometimes critical of Israel, of West, but less critical of the regime itself, the Doha regime or the Al Thani regime, because no criticism or discussion of internal policy is encouraged, either at Doha Forum or in Al Jazeera, or any critical policy of the ruling regime in Qatar.
So can we take one more question?
Very briefly.
Yes, it's a question by Dr. Al Saeed Makkawi. I think he's our Egyptian friend. And he has asked this question. I'm just reading it out. My question for Professor Pasha, sir, is how can India and China overcome their disputes to enable the multipolar order to achieve its potential?
Yeah, Al Sayed Makkawi is my student who is teaching in Manafuya University in Shubil and Kum in Egypt. He did his PhD on India and the Kashmir issue at JNU. You see, the question is interesting. Both India and China are major Asian powers, and both have been at loggerheads from 1962 war between India and China, and over Tibet and claims over territory and border clashes, etc., etc. Because the more than 5,000 long kilometer border between India and China is largely not demarcated. So claims and counterclaims have been there, which have become a norm, and Chinese encroachment also is much more widespread than what the government wants the people to believe. So in that way, it is a live dispute. There's no doubt about it. And especially after India scrapped the statehood of Kashmir through Article 370, Jammu and Kashmir, because parts of Ladakh has become an union territory, and parts of Kashmir, which were occupied by Pakistan, were given to China. That also India disputes, and the Belt and Road Initiative and CPEC also crosses through the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So in that way, the dispute is live. But China looks at it from a different perspective. Whenever India becomes close with the United States through military cooperation or through Quad and other things, they increase their cooperation to Pakistan and put pressure through Arunachal Pradesh or border encroachments or building of dams or Brahmaputra. Or over the issue of visas, staple visas, etc., etc. But there is no denying of the fact that India has become dependent on China for key imports for pharmaceutical industries, electronic industries, machinery, etc., etc. So the trade between the two countries, despite the enmity and border problems, is over $100 billion. And this is growing. And both India and China want to cooperate, but there is also intense competition, which will change the dynamics of power balance in Asia. But Russia played an important role in the Kazan summit in BRICS to bring India and China to sign a border agreement, which has brought peace and tranquility for the time being on the contentious border. But India looks at the Chinese relations much more favorably, positively, to improve. And Prime Minister Modi visited the Chinese city and during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, and they regularly interact and see how best to cooperate. But it is in the interest of BRICS and emergence of multipolar world that both India and China should cooperate much more closely than what it has been. But the American factor is disturbing the Indo-Chinese equation, and also the Pakistan factor. The Americans want India to be on their side through Quad and military cooperation. They want to use India against China to contain. But India has been resisting this through a number of ways. And in the pressure of the United States on India is basically to wean India away from China and towards the United States. But that is not going to happen. That India is not going, it's not a small country, a puppet country or client state like Pakistan or other countries which will toe the American line against our national interest to antagonize China. It is not in our interest at all. So, sensible people have been working towards closer or improved interaction relations between India and China. There's a lot India can learn from China technologically, scientifically, and in other fields also. And there's no doubt that China is going to be a major power, global power in the coming years, decades, because of its economy, because of its rising military capability and influence, so on and so forth. Now, along with Russia, these two have become the shapers of international diplomacy to a certain extent, and if they are joined through India and Iran or Turkey and Brazil and South Africa and other BRICS countries, the tilt will be decisively in favor of the Asian giants, or Eurasian giants in that way. And the Americans and the West have been unable to wean them away or create a hostile and antagonistic situation, because all of these Asian countries see advantage from each other, mutually beneficial trade and economic relations, transport connections, railroad, pipelines, etc., etc. So in that way, the Americans and the West also have vested interest, because their trade also is linked to prosperity and economic emergence of China as a major manufacturing hub. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I think now we have come to an end of this session. There is another question, I think, from Dr. Al Sayed McCoy, that I think sir is scheduled somewhere else also, and it's over 5 p.m. now. So you can directly ask sir, or you can just send him messages. We can coordinate from here. Uh, I'll take this moment to express my deep gratitude and thanks to Professor Aftab Kamal Pasha, sir, who is the director of IDDF Research Foundation and a very well known and renowned scholar on India-West Asia relations. I also thank all the participants, interns at IDDF Research Foundation, who were very instrumental in organizing this very important program about India-West Asia relations, or West Asia in particular. On 2nd of January, we are having a program with Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador of Oman on this platform only. We'll be having a program on India-Oman recent signing of SEPA, or Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. It's a very important session on 2nd of January. So I would also, like, we will be sharing all the details on social media. We also request you to follow IDDF Research Foundation on social media and other platforms. So you're updated with all the new notifications and information from our side. And we will be also having a program on 7th of January with Wali Raza Nasser on his recent book, Iran's Grand Strategy. So with this, I would love to thank again Professor Pasha sir and all the participants. With this, we come to an end of this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.